Yeah.
All right, we're rolling. I'm here with Scott Cunningham, host of Crypto and Things, which is a web series that seems to be strewn across hundreds of different platforms at this point. Is that fair to say?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you want to just give me a little bit of your background in terms of like how you got started doing it, your background in crypto, things like that.
Yeah. I started investing in crypto in late 2017, unfortunately for me. Uh, so then after the crash, I realized I wasn't the greatest investor, or rather, like I didn't time it very well. But I was still interested in the technology itself because even though I wasn't doing well with investing, I was really interested in like what could be done with this. And I've been a social media marketer by trade for about 6.5 years now. So I was wondering like what are the like possibilities for social media and blockchain to sort of work together? And I started to explore that a little bit in January of 2018. And that's when I first came upon Steam, the Steam network. And I signed up for Steam It. And from there, it's just been a journey of exploring all the platforms that are in existence and making tutorials and guides. And it just kind of blew up from there. And that's what I've been doing for the past like 2.5 years now.
It's awesome that you've been able to manifest your space in this very strange niche.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very like it kind of happened very organically because I was just looking into like almost for myself or like for companies that I might work with. It's like, okay, well, if this is becoming a big thing, will we need to know about these in the future? And if we get set up early, are we going to have like the massive benefit of like being an early joiner and kind of pioneering it? And then it kind of just built out from there. And over the past 2 years, it's become more and more obvious to me that like censorship on legacy platforms like YouTube and all the big ones that we know have really been pushing people off of those platforms, and they're looking for exactly the types of platforms that I've been exploring for the past 2 years. And I think it's just becoming more and more obvious that this is where things are headed, even though they still like are very, very small comparatively. I think even now, it's becoming more obvious as to why it's important because a lot of people are out of jobs. They're still going to be using social media. So, like, why not make extra money on the side? It's like, and a lot of people could really use that right now too. So, I think that's a huge proponent to that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good stance. And I actually initially had seen you on I think Steam It and then also Mines. And so I'll ask you a little bit about both of those,
Sure.
separately. But then also, uh, when you kind of look at the landscape, it's going up and down. It's changing. Things come up, things go down. What is the current state of affairs, so to speak, in terms of like? Oh, I'm sorry. What is
No
the current
worries.
state of affairs, so to speak, in terms of um, what you see in terms of these crypto sites? Like which ones are here to stay? Which ones seem to be fleeting? Which ones have come and gone? I know you've been in the space for 2 years. A lot's happened in two
Ooh,
years.
yeah, yeah. Very soon, I'm going to be putting out another comprehensive review. I try to do them every 3 to 4 months to sort of update people on my recommendations and also what I've actually been using. So the next one is going to have about 130 platforms that I take a look at. I include all of the websites that list all the platforms. It also is going to act as like a directory for people to be able to go through and just see everything that's out there, as well as a bunch of different useful resources. Um, but at the end of the day, I would say only 5 to 10% are going to actually survive or last in the long term. And for like real quick, what I've been using day to day and what I would like strongly recommend in terms of decentralization, profitability, uh, you know, um, like privacy focused, free speech, I would say right now, Hive, which is the new hard fork off of Steam. In case some people aren't aware, it happened very recently. We've got Library, which is probably the best decentralized video hosting application. Um, DTube exists on Steam. I'm still a big fan of DTube, and I haven't completely ruled out Steam, so I'm still on there, obviously, and I'm still going to keep using it, even though there, all the craziness happening in there. We can dive into that later if you want to. Um, Three Speak has moved over to Hive, so that's kind of like the main uh, video platform on Hive so far. Uh, I've used Minds, and I still really like Minds. They're trying hard, like very recently actually, to make it more monetizable, but it's still kind of like a pay to play where on Minds you can't really earn unless you're paying for the ability to earn, and that kind of it's
Defeats the purpose.
counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can't earn enough, it's going to be counterintuitive, and you're actually going to lose money in the process. So Minds is a very like I don't like to speak badly of Minds because it was one of my big like platforms when I was starting, and but I mean realistically, I think it's in a way it's sort of come and gone. But I see, and I actually regularly chat with the CEO Bill Ottman on Skype, and I see that he's definitely like getting the team to put in the work to improve it and make it more ideal for creators. So just recently, they 10x'd the amount that you earn as a creator. So they're definitely not joking around. Like I was going from earning like $1 to $10, over like a month or whatever it might have been. Like it's still not crazy because I just don't think there's as much traffic on there. But some of the other platforms to take a look at is Float. Now, Float doesn't like post much on the blockchain. It's really just it allows you to make crypto transactions there, and it's sort of the Patreon alternative. So it's very much based around like donations using Bitcoin and having donation tiers that will regularly donate. And you can provide all your extra stuff like you would on Patreon, and it's kind of just like that Patreon alternative. Publish OX is a really, really interesting one for me. It's probably one of my favorites because it's very, very unique in the way that it's crypto agnostic, so they don't have their own token. What they do is they accept donations from sponsors and then they give out those tokens to people. So, um, when Steam, when we saw the crash in 2000, in 2018, after Bitcoin went way up and then it went way down, everything went way down, and about half of the users on Steam stopped using Steam because it wasn't as profitable anymore. I mean, there was people who were literally all they would do was just posting on Steam, and that was their entire livelihood. Like it went from $13 down to today it's 15 cents. So while you can still definitely make money on Steam, it's not enough. So and then the problem there again is if the value goes down and a bunch of people stop using the platform, then how is the platform going to get back up to that previous value? So Publish OX kind of avoids that issue, as well as they avoid the issue of like needing to rely on people with a lot of influence or power to get votes, like you sort of have on Steam and Hive, unfortunately, because of stake. And I think that is also solved on platforms like Library, like Publish OX, when it's not so much based on like how much you hold. Library is interesting in the way that and stop me if I'm going too in depth into any specific
Oh no, not
platforms.
at all. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Library is a little different because it's not where you need to rely on votes from other people, but you do still have to stake your library coins to be able to get more visibility and boost your content. So it's really not even hard to trend on library. Like I can make my videos appear right at the top of any tag that I want if I put enough LBC into it, and it doesn't get like beat by another bid in a very short amount of time. You'll be able to get a lot of visibility, which I think is really interesting. But I do think that could also cause problems in the future where there's a bunch of people who have been doing this for a long time and have so much that it's a lot more challenging for other people to get in. But I do like it's like every view you're earning. So unlike Steam, where you're hoping that you're going to get a big vote from like a whale or something like that, this is you're going to earn no matter what, and you're going to earn as a user. So I really like Library's monetization model. I think out of every platform, they do it the best. They reward the most amount of things for the most amount of people, like creators and users. Um, do we talk Uptrend is another big
Hmm.
one. Uptrend is sort of similar to I guess it's like a merge between Float and Steam, where it's more of a like small status updates and not, well, I mean, people write articles, but I see it's more for shorter posts, and
Mm,
like something like Steam and Hive is usually more longer format. Same with PublishOX. But on Uptrend, it's interesting because when you stake, so to speak, you don't necessarily stake because you can't get your points back on Uptrend, but you're earning more for every vote that you get, and the votes that you give out are worth more. So it's a little bit different from what people are used to on like Steam and Hive, and you can't get those points back. So those are gone once you've put them into your level. But then in the future, you'll be able to earn more and more and more. So it's an interesting way for you to be able to invest in yourself, and I think that's really really interesting. And I think Uptrend has a lot of potential, and I think that's one to be looking out for like massive growth. And I think Library is one to be closely watching as well as Hive, since it just recently kind of came to fruition. There's a lot of people who still don't know a lot about it. That's pretty much the majority of the main ones that I've been using. I've also been messing around with Somi,
yeah,
Somi.social.
familiar with Soma. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fork off of Steam, and it's really interesting. The only issue that I have with Somi is that you can't like withdraw your points, you can't send your points, like you can't really do a lot unless you verify. And verification currently costs $100, and it's not even payable by crypto. So you have to pay with
Paid in
like actual
cash.
fiat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once they make it so that you can verify using crypto, I think it'll be a lot more viable. But I still feel like it's concerning if there's any platform that says you can't access your funds until you do this, especially if it's you have to pay us to access your funds. Um, like I think maybe like having a cell phone verification or something, it's like, yeah, that's not too bad. But once you get to the point where it's like, we need your ID and you have to pay us money and you have all these extra things, I think that becomes a little more like there's so much resistance, as well as it's concerning when you can't access your funds. Same with like if you're familiar with D Live, which was
Hmm.
recently acquired by Tron, and PewDiePie, the number one YouTuber, he exclusively live streams there. So there's a lot of like traction on that platform. But the problem is that you can't withdraw your funds from D Live. Well, I mean, it's in the process of migrating now,
Right.
but
Right.
previously you couldn't withdraw your funds unless you had a minimum requirement, like you had to have at least 4,250. You had to also provide them with your ID, and you had to be 16. Mind you, you could buy it and be 13 and not be able to
Hmm.
withdraw until 3 years later and you have an ID.
Right.
Um, you had to, what was the other one? There was four requirements. I'm forgetting the third, but the fourth one, which was recently added, was you have to have also streamed 80 hours worth of content. And that makes some sense for streamers, but it weirdly also applied to anyone who had any currency. So
Right.
you had to become a creator to get your money back. So what that basically manipulate their numbers, because anyone who wanted to get their money back had to turn on a webcam and stream for 80 hours, regardless if it was actually streaming anything at all and not just like a blank room. um and I think that was just a weird way to like inflate their numbers. But I mean, I understand it for creators, but the fact that it applies to users as well seemed really really sketchy to me. And then when they finally were migrating, they said, okay, if you're not in the United States, you can just get your money back. But if you're in the United States, all of these requirements still apply to you. So for all I know, a lot of people lost all of their Lino points, which was the currency that they were using. And another sketchy thing too is that Lino points was supposed to be an independent blockchain, and then a third party application on it was DLive. But when DLive started to migrate, it just so happened that Lino blockchain said, oh, we're shutting down. So, and they were like basically codependent. Like you couldn't have Lino points without also using DLive, and you couldn't use DLive without the Lino points. And they claimed to be like independent, but they were clearly not. So there was a lot of really sketchy things going on there. And I had hoped that Tron was going to maybe fix some of this stuff, but after seeing what happened to Steam, I uh, I don't think that's going to happen. And I think that they were just buying PewDiePie's influence on the platform. But yeah, I'll stop rambling now. That's kind of my overview of a lot of the platforms that I've been using lately, and what's kind of going on.
Yeah, no, and I definitely appreciate that input. And I think that it's interesting from being kind of outside of the crypto social scene. I had mined Bitcoin and Litecoin both in the past, but like I don't consider myself to be part of like whatever the internet has taken off with the crypto trading communities,
Mm-hmm.
as much as I should at least. Um, there's an overarching theme of like profitability on social media, whereas like if you look at like traditional like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, there isn't like this sense of making money off of your social media.
Yeah.
And do you feel like that's a prerequisite for these communities? Like that's definitely like if there's no way to profit, like what's the point?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. While I would hope in a very like idealistic sense that that
Hmm.
wouldn't be the case, it pretty much is. I mean,
Okay.
and here's the best way to look at it. Not looking at it from the sense of, oh, like you only want to use this to make money. It's more like, okay, well, for the people who are on legacy platforms, what are they doing to try to monetize? Okay, well, let's go through it. On LinkedIn, I get like 10 messages a day asking me to buy some course or,
Hmm.
pay a business coach or whatever it might be. People are still trying to monetize on legacy platforms. It's just very unscrupulous, and it's like unsolicited, and a lot of it's spam, and a lot of it's affiliate marketing and things that don't provide you with much value. Now
Hmm.
we look at blockchain crypto platforms. It's like, I can still provide value, and I don't have to do any kind of, unscrupulous methods to earn money, and I can make a decent profit. So on average, I would say lately I've been getting 300 to $400 US a month across all the platforms when I consolidate all of it. And that's nothing to scoff at, especially for people who need extra income right now. Obviously, it's taking me a long time to get to this point.
Hmm.
But there's some platforms that I've joined much more recently than others. Like I haven't been on Library a very long time compared to Steam.
Hmm.
So, I definitely think there's a huge value proposition for people to jump on these platforms. And the best part is, it's free. So there's no concern like you're going to have to spend money to get into it or whatever it might be,
Hmm.
which is what a lot of these things are on legacy platforms too, right? It's like, buy my course so I can teach you how to do such and such to make money. Or you could just post something and make money. Um, and I remember like even when I first started on Steam and I checked out like Steep Shot, which was like an Instagram version of Steam, and I had just posted a selfie and I earned like $1. And that's when I kind of realized, okay, this is like a crazy way to make money. And not only that, realizing the potential in the future where it's like you could live stream your walk to the store to buy some milk, and by the time you get there you've been rewarded with enough cryptocurrency to pay for said milk at the register. And I think that is a really, really interesting vision of the future on how we monetize attention and our social presence. And I'm actually right now, I'm very, very early stages writing a book on blockchain and being able to earn money. And I'm calling it the undiscovered value of your content, because I think a
Hmm.
lot of people, like, I was posting on YouTube for a long time, never earned $1. I have 19,000 followers on LinkedIn, never earned anything from it. uh, People don't realize that they have all this influence on legacy platforms that gets them nothing. So they don't think that their content is worth $1 amount. And then they go on crypto platforms and then they realize people are giving me money for this, and not even necessarily like donating or tipping, but like the platforms are paying me my fair share. Facebook, like, you already always had that value. Facebook, LinkedIn, they were just taking it and getting it through the ads. Now you can get a share of that, and people don't even realize that that's possible until they start. So that's why I'm writing this book about the undiscovered value of what your
Mhm.
content already has, but you don't know until you actually get on these platforms and start posting.
Yeah, I think that's really well put. And I think that that's definitely going to be a cultural shift, at least like on the internet. The other thing that I noticed right away was I feel like crypto sites tend to attract a certain type of political people that have been kind of pushed out of different, platforms, and sometimes that
Yeah.
makes it also kind of like rough to sift through it because obviously you have like heavy extremist views in both ways. I know like
Yeah.
my Minds feed is very polarized.
Yeah. Mine's feels like Gab in that sense.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Everyone wants somebody dead, but you have to read who, like the whole post to figure out who.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that like obviously the idea is free speech, do you think that's going to be moderated in any way, or how is that moderated on some of these sites, if it is?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, there's different approaches, right? Like some sites are a little more centralized than others. It depends how you approach it. So for example, Hive and Steam have everything on the blockchain. So it's always there, but based on community voting, it will sort of filter it out for the average person. But it's still there if you want to go and look at that person's profile. So that's how they avoid censorship, but still have some means of moderating content, so at least you're like sifting through some of the worst content. And then you've got platforms like PublishOX, which are not as decentralized. Like they vet their authors, and they'll do some moderation, but they do try to keep it free speech focused. They're really just trying to moderate like spam and all that stuff. But the more centralized you are, the more potential you have for issues in the future, like we saw with Facebook and YouTube. And then you've got platforms like Minds where they do have moderation, but you can do community appeals, and the community will actually do the voting in a jury sense. So there's a lot of different approaches, and you know it's hard to determine which is the best approach so far because it's still so early. So I
Hmm.
mean, it really depends what people value, because some people say, it's not a real blockchain platform unless the posts are on the blockchain. Okay, well then you're only really going to be looking at Steam, Hive, and Library. Actually also Somi. But if you're okay to just have, like crypto monetized platforms, well, then you can also use Uptrend, PublishOX, Float. A lot of platforms aren't fully on the blockchain, but there are platforms that are pushing towards that. So I think they always start more centralized and they try to work to a more decentralized point. I do think in terms of like the ethos of it, that's more challenging to give up power as you go,
Hmm.
versus like Steam starting at a certain point and then just like keeping that going. Um, but every platform's got its up and downs. Like, I don't know if you're super familiar with EOS Voice because it just recently launched, but I still haven't had access to it because it's only in the US right now.
Hmm.
But they are in beta, and it explicitly states that they may reset all the tokens at the end of the beta. Now,
Hmm.
Steemit has been in beta for more than 4 years.
Right.
So, when you take that into account, obviously they're completely different platforms, but say EOS is in beta for 4 years. Okay, well, you're not going to make any money for 4 years. And if you do, it might just be like deleted. So as long as you're okay with that, that's fine. But for me personally, I don't like the idea of using a platform and then having everything that you do get reset at some random point,
Right. Right.
in the future, and you don't even really know. Um, so yeah, I think it's really important to have the bases covered, and I've put out a few different like posts where it's like this is what you should avoid and this is what you should look for. Um, if you want to talk about platforms that have like sort of closed down or been scams recently, like I talk about hyperspace narrative. These are platforms that that they seemed like they were doing something okay. I didn't recommend them in my previous recommendations, and then
Hmm.
they closed down. Narrative is a really egregious example because their ICO they got about, I think it was between 5 and 8 million, and then while they were in operation for only 1 year, they sold a lot of niches, which is sort of like categories or tags on their platform, and people can own them, and then you get proceeds from people posting in them. So people bought these niches, and they earned even more money from that. But they only ever gave away $1,500 in the full year, and then they claimed bankruptcy.
Hmm.
So what happened, right? They also, and this is why I like sort of criticize Somi, they had a verification process that you had to pay for, uh, and it was paid for via cash, not crypto.
Hmm.
And I did that, and I did that maybe like 2 weeks before they closed down. So I was a little, I had a sour taste in my mouth. I mean, it was only like $15, luckily not 100 like Somi. But yeah, like they shut it down. They said, sorry, we're bankrupt, and that this is it for narrative. And everyone's wondering, like, what happened to the millions of dollars? Like, you don't even have a huge staff. You barely gave any money away. And they just said, sorry, we're done, and that's it. And and now I've started to sort of look at platforms when I'm joining them. It's like if they have these weird, like, you have to pay extra to have all these other things, it starts to sketch me out, because a lot of these platforms that do this um have had problems, like again, narrative, D Live, where they have restrictions on being able to access your funds. That is just the biggest, like, red flag for me now. And I think that's an easy way to tell if a platform uh is going to be viable for, a long time, versus like if it might not have the best intentions originally.
Right, right. Well, then of course, I think broader, the crypto community is uh, victim to pump and dump schemes every day,
Yeah.
right? Even the legitimate coins. So it's hard
Yeah.
to know what you're doing. So if I'm just kind of switch gears, if I'm trying to build a brand today, obviously you have a business kind of built around using these platforms. How would I build myself out? So we could even use like what I do today as an example in terms of doing cybersecurity services, in terms of putting out some video content, some blog content. I started this podcast video uploads on DTube, but then I had really mixed results on that, and then I'm kind of lost in terms of where to go from there. Mine's is strange. Where
Yeah.
do I go?
Yeah. So well, actually, just before we dive in, what were the mixed results on DTube, just so I have a better take on this?
Yeah, so it's hard to get traction on there for sure. Uploads sometimes took very long.
Yeah.
Not dependent on my internet, but because every could upload anywhere else, pretty easily. But the platform didn't seem very stable. Once it was finally on there, it was quickly, there was no way for me to get it in front of people, even if I wanted to pay for it.
Yeah, yeah. So what I would say is, the big challenge with like Steam and Hive is it's very challenging to get started, and you kind of have to work through a bit of a curve, because originally it's going to be really hard to break through the noise. And I mean, they did actually recently just like in maybe like past 2 weeks update their publisher, so it should be a
Mhm.
lot easier to post on there now. Um, but yeah, like I would definitely say it's very, very challenging, and you kind of have to build relationships with other users on there to actually start getting more traction. So I would definitely say it is more challenging. You can invest still in some bid bots to get more visibility for your posts, where you'll pay a certain amount, they will vote that same amount onto your post so that you get that traction. And I would say if you were going to do that, you should be posting in less popular tags so that you can trend on those tags and get the awareness from that, versus trying to post on the most popular tags and being way further down the list. That's how I would say you'd get started there. But platforms that are much easier to get started on,
Yeah.
I would say library is probably the best. And it's mainly video, so it's mainly for video content. You can put images as well. It doesn't have a huge character count, so it's not very blog friendly or very long format friendly, but it's definitely the best go-to for putting up videos. I would say my favorite for consistently earning and consistent engagement is for like long format is PublishOX.
Hmm.
Though I would say PublishOX is very crypto focused and blockchain focused. That's the biggest complaint I've heard about it. So I would say, well, I'd say two things. Um, if you get started and you want to start posting on crypto platforms, you could still post the same stuff that you're posting anywhere else. Like it shouldn't take so much more effort. And there's different ways that'll help you too. So bittube.com will
Hmm.
auto sync from YouTube. Same with library. Both of those platforms you can set up and you can have your videos automatically uploaded from YouTube. You could never touch those platforms again and just log in and take your money out if that was what you wanted to do.
Hmm.
I obviously recommend being more engaged, especially with library, because you want to, if you support your posts, as in like staking on them, that's how you'll get the visibility. And the best part about it is you're not actually spending any money and you can instantly get it all back. So there's really no cons to doing it. I
Hmm.
would just take my entire balance, put it into one post, leave it for a day, take my entire balance out, put it in the next post the next day. Um, and I think that's the most effective way to do that on library. And it is cheap enough now where you could buy, 10,000 library coins and have enough to get some decent visibility. And then I think you could just earn off of that and kind of just keep things going. I've got about 54,000 library coins, and I
Hmm.
started with buying about 16,000. So I've earned like three times of what I started with in the past like 4 or 5 months. So
Okay.
I definitely think there's a lot of potential with library. That's probably my most bullish platform out of every platform that I'm going to
Hmm.
recommend. I would probably go with library because they give you the most ways to monetize and earn. And even if you just sync your YouTube, they're going to pay you 90 LBC every month just because you synced, even if you get no views.
Yeah.
Just for syncing, they're going to give you, if you have at least 1,000 followers. It's based on follower tiers. So, I mean, if
Hmm.
you had 1 million followers, they're going to be paying you over $1,000 worth of LBC every year just for having synced to the platform. So you could never post again and still get paid every month. So I think that's really really interesting, and they're doing a lot to incentivize that. But for people starting off, yeah, I would just say looking at the type of content that you create and then kind of mapping that out. So if it's video content, ideally try posting to DTube, 3Speak, and Library. Those are kind of like the main go-to video platforms. And then
Hmm.
if you want to set up the syncing to BitTube and stuff as well, I would recommend doing that. And yeah, that would be the route to go for video. And then if you're doing blogging and stuff, check out PublishOX, Uptrend. You know, you could also blog on Steam. It's not as easy, but it's worth trying. And I would also say that it is challenging. Outside of crypto and blockchain, it is not as easy to get traction. But what I do think is important to make note of is, say these platforms become mass adopted in the next few years,
Hmm.
and you went on today and you said, I'm a gardener, no one is posting about gardening on PublishOX, so I'm not going to post about gardening and I'm not going to bother because it's not for me. Well, and then 3 years go by and you see PublishOX is the number one platform in the world, and all the gardeners are on there and they're all making crazy money, and you're like, damn, I could have been the first one and I would have been the authority on the platform if I had just made that effort early on. And that's the way that I've looked at every platform. So I'm posting on more than 15 platforms a day because I'm not trying to rule out any platforms that might eventually have massive traction, because I think it's really important to get started early, and just starting early, even if there's less traction, all that stuff, I think that's going to have a massive impact on how you'll do in the future. Because if these do reach mass adoption, or even just get a lot more people like, and still not mass adoption, but you'll be benefiting off of getting started really early and kind of carving out your niches in these platforms. And that is probably one of the biggest things I hear is, oh, well, this platform doesn't have enough content of the stuff that I create. So I don't want to be the person to like break that barrier. But I think that's really important that people do, because if everyone sort of starts to think that way, then that's what will bring it to mass adoption, and all those people will benefit massively from doing that.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I definitely, being in more of like cybersecurity focus, I think that it makes sense for me to pay more attention to it too. But I think broadly, if somebody is listening and a gardener, this is kind of your wake up call. Um, but yeah, it's interesting to see kind of where those communities are going to go. I'm curious to see if monetization is still the key like deciding factor. Because like for me, I would trade money for visibility logically. And I think that like most marketers, or at least more traditional marketers, would do that at least initially. And then the minute you kind of pump the brakes on trying to get visibility, you would still have that visibility account, and then the money would just come.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I would definitely say, if that was like the thing that you were like most focused on, like if you're like, I
Hmm.
just want to build out a platform, I'm not super worried about making money in the first year, I just want to get the most visibility possible, what of the different platforms is going to be the best for me? Using Steam, and if you have like, if you have some Steam to put into bid bots, you could
Hmm.
definitely get a lot more visibility. And if you're curious about like what bid bots are and how that all works, I use steambottracker.com, and that will tell you every bid bot that is currently working. It's definitely very few now, but you can still you can see how much vote value do they have, what's the minimum that I would have to give, and like what are the risks and potential benefits of doing this. And then you can see when the next votes they'll send out, and all the information that you would need. And then you would really just send them a certain amount. In the memo you would post your URL, and then they would go and upvote it, given there's no like issues with the vote, the post itself, the content.
Right.
Otherwise they would refund you. But I definitely think that is a great way to get yourself out there. I mean, obviously the post has to be quality, or else everyone who sees it will just say, this doesn't deserve to be trending, I'm going to downvote this and put it back to the level of quality that I believe it actually is. So if you are going to invest money, you definitely want to make sure you're putting out your best possible stuff, so that I mean, obviously, because if you're going to put money into it, you want to showcase your best work, and then so that people don't feel that it's not high enough quality to be where it is. I think that's really important. Library is probably the easiest for getting a lot of visibility at the lowest possible cost. um, Mines is good for visibility because you do earn a lot of Mines tokens, and then each Mine token is worth 1,000 views worth of boost advertising. The problem is that over the past year or so, they've drastically, it feels like they've throttled the boost network. So they've made it so you can only do one sidebar boost and one newsfeed boost per 24 hours. Previously, it was unlimited. Um, and they also drastically increased the price of Mines tokens. So about a year ago, or year and a half, I can't remember exactly, but it was about 15 cents. Today it's about $1. So that's also concerning. I don't like it when arbitrary price changes happen to cryptocurrencies. But when you've got platforms like, I mean, to be fair, they never claimed that it was like a normal cryptocurrency. It's supposed to be a utility token, so it's really
Hmm.
mainly just supposed to be used for that. It's not supposed to be traded and sold. Uh, but it does have an eerie reminder of like DLive, because at any time DLive could have changed their price and no one would have been the wiser. In fact, If you bought D Live off the website, it costed, let's just say for example, it was like 20 cents. But if you bought it on the app, it was about like 15% more expensive. So, I don't like it when it's not traded publicly and then they arbitrarily change it. I think that's really, really concerning, and that definitely devalues it. Or, like, I mean, if they make it more expensive, obviously not, but then all the people who bought it originally have this massive advantage over everyone else. So, I do think Minds is really good though for visibility, though it's been getting a little bit worse. Though I do know they are trying their best to improve the network. So I still think there's some viability there. Um, Uptrend is probably the easiest in terms of they have the cheapest boosting model. So
Mm-hmm.
in the past, like I think it was maybe 2 or 3 months ago, they made it 10 times cheaper. So where it used to cost like 10 points for one view, now it's just I think it's maybe 1 point, or maybe it's less. I think what I normally do is I normally do 500 views and that costs me 50 points. So yeah, it's about a tenth less than what it used to be, I think. Something like
Okay.
that. But
Okay. Okay.
it's ridiculously cheap,
Yeah.
and I could boost all of my content and barely see a dent in my uptrend points. So I think there's a lot of benefit there, though ever since they have done that, obviously the amount of boost has drastically increased. So you don't get as much visibility because there's way more competition. But I definitely think you can get a lot of visibility through Uptrend. Those are kind of the four platforms that have a very strong, boost network where you can actually pay or put something into your posts and get a lot more visibility. And I definitely had that mindset when I was starting, especially with Minds. I thought there was, even though I wasn't going to make money from this, I thought there was a lot of potential because I could boost and get a lot of visibility. And that did definitely get me really far for a long time, but it's definitely sort of tapered off a bit. So out of those platforms, I would say the safest bets right now are Uptrend and Library, but there's still definitely potential in sharing it on Steam and Minds as well.
Yeah, no, I definitely, like I said, I really appreciate it. I think it's, you've been on the platforms longer than most. You've been on all of them. I think if there's ever a crypto thing that I pop in on, I do see your face. So, I definitely appreciate you taking the time to kind of give me a rundown through them.
Yeah,
If there's like
absolutely.
one final piece of like advice you can give anyone that might be listening to this that's trying to get involved, what would it be?
If I could boil it down to one piece of advice, I would say don't um don't judge a platform too quickly if you're not getting the traction or the profitability that you want. I mean that's probably the most true for like Steam and Hive, but I would say try them out, fully dedicate to it for a little bit. Like don't post once or twice and then make your decision. I would say like maybe try genuinely using it for like 30 days before you actually come to a conclusion. I think a lot of these platforms are going to fall off, and some of them are going to make it to mainstream, and it's really about kind of finding that balance. And that's exactly why I'm doing the reviews that I do, so that you guys don't have to waste hours and hours and hours combing through all of these platforms. So I would just say, you know try each platform if you can, or at least the main big ones. At least give them a chance, and keep a lookout for some of the things I mentioned, red flags on certain platforms, like having to pay for verification and different things like that. Um, but yeah, I think that this is definitely going to be the future, and that people who are looking to make money are looking for, what's the next big thing. I think that this is the next big thing, especially in social media. I think that we're going to keep seeing more and more censorship. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. We're going to see more and more demonetization, and all the motivations that led people to cryptocurrency are going to become more and more prominent And we're going to see more and more people joining these platforms, especially with everyone working from home and all the things happening as they are. So I think this is the time to get involved. And I think everyone has the time to get involved with these platforms now. So, yeah, definitely check these out. And I'm not sponsored by any, and I'm not, specifically promoting any specific one over any other platform. I think they all have different benefits and drawbacks, and that they should all be treated uniquely and looked at, from a completely unique perspective for each.
Perfect. Like I said, thank you very much. I'll have links to the 500 ways you can get in contact with Scott in the description, wherever you're listening to this, whether it's the RSS feed or on via video somewhere. Like I said, thanks again. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Awesome. Thanks so much,
Yep.
man. Cheers.
Yep. Yep.